of our Lord are so sweet to our ears, though silently whispered and quietly spoken. The words of our Master are songs for our hearts, though silently sung and quietly heard. He tells us be still and remember Him daily. He tells us be kind and forgive. He sings in our hearts with the voices of angels, revealing the reason to live. I am with you always, can't you hear me? I am with you always, you are near me. Nearer than the nearest, dearer than the dearest. I am your very own. I am your very own. The love of our Lord is as vast as the ocean, though silently given and quietly born. The love of our Master is flowing forever, though silently offered and quietly shared. He tells us be still and remember Him daily. He tells us be kind and forgive. He sings in our hearts with the voices of angels, revealing the reason to live. I am with you always, can't you hear me? I am with you always, you are near me. Nearer than the nearest, dearer than the dearest. I am your very own. I am your very own. I am your very Om Asato Ma Sangamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mritya Ma Amritam Gamaya Ave Ave Ma Edhi Rundrayate Dakshina Mukham Te Namam Pahinityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through, O Lord, and protect us evermore with your loving presence. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning. The title of today's talk is Words to Live By. And that's what they are. That's what I'm going to give today. I've picked out several teachings that I have tried, however imperfectly, to live by over the last few decades. And I have found that the better I am
at following these teachings, the better my life becomes. And I have found that the more I ignore these teachings, the worse my situation becomes. And it's not just my life. I've been around this Vedanta place long enough to see this happen to other people too. And so I'm pretty convinced that these words are universal. They are words that we can all live by and profit from. So that is the idea behind today's talk. And actually, there's a lot more of these things that I could fit into, that I would like to talk about, that I could fit into today. So I may do another one of these at some point, but today, this is what we got. I'm going to start with the Mahabharata. This is a famous portion of the Mahabharata called the Yaksha Prajna. Isn't this thing working? They're both working. Okay. It is a dialogue between one of the Pandava brothers and a magical bird, a talking bird that is actually a yaksha. And it's a fascinating conversation. There are many questions and answers. I'm just going to do one. To give the backstory, probably a lot of you know this. The Pandava brothers are wandering around the forest, and a deer steals some kindling wood from a sage, steals, he accidentally gets it in his antlers and runs off. And the sage comes to the Pandava brothers and says, this deer took my sticks, go get them, please help me. And they're nice people, so they do. And they're wandering around the forest looking for this deer. They get thirsty and tired, and they take a rest. And the oldest brother tells the youngest brother, why don't you go find some water for us? And the youngest brother goes looking around, and he finds a lake. And he's super thirsty. He gets to this lake, and there's this talking bird at the lake. And the talking bird says, wait, don't drink that water. First answer my questions. And the brother ignores him and drinks the water and falls over dead. And then what happens is, after a while, he doesn't come back, and the oldest brother tells second youngest brother, why don't you go find out what happened to him? And so he goes, repeats, gets to the lake, bird says, wait, don't drink that water. He ignores the bird, drinks the water, drops over dead. Repeat this 4 times until there's no more brothers left except the oldest brother. Finally, he says, okay, I have to go figure out what's going on. Where are all my brothers? So he gets to the lake, sees his brothers all lying dead at the shore, and the bird says, wait, don't drink that water. First answer my questions. Then Yudhishthira intelligently decides to listen to the bird and not drink the water. What is that? And the bird, there's probably 100 questions that they go back and forth, and it's fascinating, their exchange. I'm just going to do one here. One question that this bird asks Yudhishthira. He says, by subduing what do men escape grief? By subduing what do men escape grief? And Yudhishthira says, by subduing their minds. Now this teaching, that we must subdue the mind, is, on the one hand, completely obvious. Why is this completely obvious? It's completely obvious for one reason, because we know our minds. We know our minds better than anything and anyone else in this world. We know our minds. We know all the thoughts in our minds, every single little thing. And we know that if we followed every impulse and every little idea in our minds, we would quickly find ourselves in jail, broke, humiliated, who knows? All these thoughts in the minds, a lot of them, we just can't act on. There are a lot of these things in here that are just nuts. And fortunately, we have this thing called a discriminating intellect, a buddhi, according to the yoga psychologists, which tells us when the alarm in the morning goes off, no, you can't sleep anymore, you better get out of bed now. After we've had 3 or 4 cookies, that's probably enough. You don't need the 4th cookie, right? No, you probably shouldn't say that to your boss if you want to keep this job, right? This is the discriminating intellect that we all have, and it saves us from misery. That's one reason it's obvious. Another reason this is obvious, number 2, is we have a parade of people passing in front of us every single day who don't listen to this, and we get to see what happens to them. It's in the media, the social media, it's on the tabloid magazines at the grocery store. You cannot miss this. The most recent victim is Danny Masterson. I never knew who he was, but now he's in jail, sentenced to 30 years because of sexual assaults, and he was rich and famous and good looking. You'd think that would be enough to give you sufficient female attention. It wasn't. Why? Because his appetites were so strong. His mind was not subdued. He just couldn't satisfy his own desire. His mind was out of control. And now he has ruined his life and the lives of others. Sad, tragic. Sometimes it's comical. Hilarious guy, the politician, George Santos. What does he want? He wants power, prestige. He wants position and respect. He wants to be in government, high up. And the irony of his fate is he looks like a complete fool. I don't know, I looked it up. You know, this is the age of the internet, and so the lies he told are so preposterous, you can easily find web pages on the internet that are devoted to ranking the preposterousness of his lies in chronological order, right? Just how this is most and second and all that. A few of these will give you the idea, what he lied about to get into office. He claimed to be a Broadway musical producer. I mean, think about that. Are they not going to check that? I mean, couldn't you have thought of a lower profile occupation to brag about? Something that maybe was, I mean, it's just child's play. I mean, anyone would know this. In our saner moments, we would know, hey, don't make up something so high profile like that. You're going to get caught. And it didn't end there. He's a college volleyball star. No. He's a struggling landlord. No. And then he's got all these fabricated tragedies. His grandparents died in the Holocaust. No. He's Catholic. He's not Jewish. He didn't have grandparents in Germany. His mother died in 9/11 tower crashing. No, she wasn't even in the country. He had employees that died at I forget the name of the nightclub. Some gay nightclub in Florida that got shot up, Pulse. He had employees that died at the Pulse nightclub. They were shot to death. No, none of these high-profile, absurd lies that are just so easily falsifiable happened. And he lost his sense. He lost his judgments. So it's obvious, because we see these people day in and day out doing this in front of us. And yet at the same time, it's not obvious. Why is it not obvious? Because we don't trace these tragedies, these tragic figures, we don't trace them back to a mind that has not been subdued. We think, oh, well, I would never be such a monster as Danny Masterson, or I would never be so stupid as George Santos to say these outrageous things and think that I wouldn't get caught. But the fact is that we are all vulnerable to this if we do not police our minds. How does that happen? Why are we all vulnerable to this? It is explained in brutal detail in the Bhagavad Gita. And Sri Krishna says this. He says, thinking about sense objects will attach you to sense objects. Grow attached and you become addicted. Thwart your addiction, it turns to anger. Be angry and you confuse your mind. Confuse your mind and you forget the lesson of experience. Forget experience, you lose discrimination, and your life is ruined effectively. You miss life's only purpose. So it's this kind of downward bouncing ball down the staircase here. It gets worse and worse as you go. And by the time we get to addiction, that's when we've lost our buddhi, our discriminating intellect. We know that we've had enough cookies, but we just can't stop it. We've got to have another cookie, or whatever it is, right? We know that we shouldn't do this, and we just keep doing it, and finally that voice is so overthrown by our behavior that we are completely lost. And so we are all potential victims of this fate in one form or another, depending on our personality, our proclivities, and all that. And so you might think this is my second words to live by, but it isn't. It's a little bit too long. I mean, I've definitely had this teaching of the Gita rattling around my brain for the last few decades, but it's a little too long, and I just don't want to think about going down the staircase all the time. It just doesn't seem that constructive. I was looking for a Vedanta meme for this talk, something that's been going on in my head, just, simple, short, easy to remember, and this is the one that's been kind of in my head like a meme. It's from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. What he says to M, so simple. The more you think of worldly things, the more you will be attached to them. That's the root of the whole problem, right? The more you think about worldly things, the more you'll be attached to them. And it's so simple, and yet trying to put this into practice is not that easy to do. Why? Because we live in the midst, so it seems, according to our current state of development, we live in the midst of worldly things. We wake up surrounded by worldly things. We get into a worldly thing and go off to work or school or whatever and do some worldly things with people and come home and futz around with a few worldly things before bed, and that's it, right? Our whole life is worldly things. How could we not think about them? Doesn't seem realistic. I mean, there's got to be some filtering process here where some worldly things are okay and some are not, and some are okay for some people and others are okay for other people, and I'm doing this one too much and that one not enough or something. In other words, the specifics of this teaching are very idiosyncratic. Depends very much on our personal spiritual needs. Our personal spiritual malady, if you would call it that. And so, how do we know how to translate this teaching into a particular practice that will benefit us? That brings me to words to live by, number 3. This is Holy Mother. And I have to say, if you're looking for words to live by, Holy Mother is a good place to go. She seems to be perfect. She seems to have the perfect answer to everything. If you haven't read her life and teachings, I would recommend doing it. There's a great biography of her by Nikhilananda. We generally have that in the bookstore. Anyway, what does she say? Mother says, so simply again, if you don't meditate morning and evening, how can you know what you're actually doing? If you don't meditate morning and evening, how can you know what you're actually doing? Well, those of us who don't meditate morning and evening think that we do actually know what we're doing. And then if we start meditating morning and evening, we realize that we're learning a lot more about what we're doing. Maybe we thought we knew what we were doing before, but now that we've been meditating morning and evening for a while, we realize that we're learning a lot more about who we are and what we're doing. And I'm going to go into this in brutal detail. I'm going to talk about this from 2 perspectives. First, how we know what we're doing is improved by morning and evening meditation from the perspective of the conscious mind. And I'm going to break that up into 3 parts. And then I'm going to talk about the unconscious mind, and I'm going to break that up into 2 parts. So, first, how do we know what we're doing with respect to our conscious mind? How does this change our awareness to meditate morning and evening? What I'm going to say now, is particularly relevant to evening meditation, which is the tough one for those of us who have to go to work and have a life in the world. You can wake up in the morning and generally squeeze in maybe a half an hour for the shrine, maybe. Getting a half an hour or more in the evening after a tough day at work is a big challenge for a lot of people. It always was for me. When I was, the morning one I could do, the evening one was spotty. Makes a huge difference if you can get in there in the evening. Why? Because it shifts our perspective. That's the first thing I'm going to talk about, shifting our perspective. What does that mean? When we sit to meditate in the evening, whatever it is we're doing, doesn't really matter. If we're trying to breathe or watch our breath, or if we're trying to focus our attention on a spiritual ideal, or we're trying not to think of anything, some people try and do that, what do we find? We find a whole bunch of uninvited thoughts in our minds are distracting us from our meditation agenda, whatever that agenda is. And what does this tell us? It tells us, for one thing, that I'm not the thinker. At least a lot of the time, I'm not the thinker. Because now I'm not trying to think. I'm trying to do something else. Or maybe I'm trying to think about something else. But there's a bunch of other thoughts that I don't know where they came from, and I don't know where they're going. And I don't know how they got here, and they're bothering me. I am not the agent of these thoughts. And so we sit down and meditate, and what are these thoughts? Typically, they're the things that happened to me that day. The conversations I had, places I went, the jerk that cut me off on the freeway. All these things, they just, right back up, there they are for me. And I think, well, gee, this isn't really working. I thought I sat down here to meditate this evening to escape from all this. I don't want to hear this again. I can't focus on this meditation because the whole day is coming back to me. Right? The movie I saw last night, there it is, right? But this has value. These thoughts have value. This experience of these thoughts coming and pestering us is valuable. Why? Because we are not the thinker, we are the observer of these thoughts. They are being presented to us. We are trying to do something else. We're trying to do our meditation agenda. Instead, we're getting a conversation that we had at work or at school or whatever. But I'm not the talker in the conversation. I am the witness of the conversation. I am seeing this conversation from a different perspective. An objective, a more objective perspective. What does this do? This broadens my perspective, right? This shifts my perspective. So now I see the situation a little bit differently. I'm perhaps more inclined to see the other person's point of view in this conversation because I am of necessity seeing this thing more objectively. This shifts our perspective and broadens our viewpoints and helps us to know better what we are doing. And then there's those annoying times in these situations where the conversation or the experience, getting cut off on the freeway or whatever it was, is emotionally gripping. It was an emotional conversation. And it pulls me right back into it. Okay, so now I'm getting into number 2 here. The first way this affected the conscious mind was a shift in our perspective. This is the second way, and this is how we filter out negative emotions. How do we filter out negative emotions? What happens? I'm concentrating, and I'm back at work, and I'm arguing with somebody, or in the monastery. Monks argue too, wherever you are. I'm back in that situation and I'm arguing with someone. And then I go down the argument road for a while. I replay this whole thing. And then maybe I fantasize about next time. Oh, I'll say this, right, or whatever. And then what happens? I go, oh, wait. I'm in a shrine meditating. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I just got completely taken down the river by this train of thoughts. I got caught. And what happens in that moment when we recover ourselves from our little fantasy of getting cut off on the freeway or whatever, emotional fantasy? There's a brief moment there where we are aware of our bodies. the emotional charge of the replay that we just experienced has taken a toll, had an effect on our physiology. Each emotion is subtly different. Generally speaking, what happens is our breathing is more shallow, our heart rate is elevated, our blood pressure is increased, and you can feel all these things in that moment when you catch yourself. You can even sometimes feel hormonal changes that make your blood feel different. All these subtle changes in the body. When we have one of these emotional thoughts that carries us down the river, we are now aware of in a way that we were not aware of when they happened during the day. We were so caught up in the argument, the guy cut me off on the freeway and maybe I shouted and honked my horn or something. Didn't seem like that big of a deal. It was over. I went on and did other things. But now sitting here in the shrine and reliving this experience of getting cut off on the freeway and shouting, I can feel all these changes in my body. It's amazing. What do we learn from this? We learn that these negative emotions are hurting us. These are not good for us. These are hurting our bodies and our health. This is tremendously informative. Because what do we realize from this? We realize that the jerk on the freeway is not my problem. He's not my enemy. What is my enemy? My enemy is the anger I feel towards the jerk on the freeway. That's what's hurting me. Assuming I hit the brakes in time, right? I didn't get hurt in the car. My response hurt me. And I'm learning this when I sit quietly in the shrine and reliving these experiences. I don't care about the external agent. I care about my response to the external agent. That's what this is teaching me. I don't care about what you think about me. I care what I think you think about me. Right? That's what this is teaching me. And so you think, okay, well, how does this help us know what we're doing? Yes, we learn this emotional response, and we feel these emotions, and okay, we know something more about the emotions. How is Mother's teaching satisfied by this? How do we know what we're doing better because of this? There was a great study, kind of humorous actually, done by some psychologists to test this. What they did is they got an attractive woman to ask a bunch of young college men some meaningless questions, a questionnaire she was doing for something or other that meant nothing and the questions were nothing. They put her on a bridge, in the middle of a bridge, on some college campus somewhere, and the bridge is a very wide, gentle, safe bridge, just a few feet over a calm creek. And she asks a bunch of these silly questions that don't mean anything, and then after it's over, she gives the people her phone number. Every man, she gives her phone number and says, if you want to talk about this pointless baloney later, then call me up. The idea being, what they're really trying to figure out is how many men are interested in the woman after this questionnaire. That's the real agenda here by the psychologists. And so they found out after this experience that not very many were interested. Only 12% of the guys called up and said, okay, let's talk more about this. And then they repeat the experiments. And this time, I want to get the numbers right. Let me see if I can get these numbers here. Yeah, okay. So this time, they put the woman on a wobbly, narrow bridge, 450 feet long, with a fatal 230-foot drop below it. Okay, so this is now, we're putting her in basically a kind of life and death situation. And we're going to do the same experiments. We're going to ask these men these pointless questions and give them the phone number and invite them to talk more about this stuff to see how many are interested in her now that they're facing life and death on this bridge. More than 4 times as many men called her back. More than half of the respondents called up the woman afterwards to talk to her. Why? What does it mean? What happened? We have an adrenaline rush from this dangerous situation, and we don't understand our own emotions. We don't know what we're feeling, and we think, maybe I'm in love. Duh. Right? Maybe this is romance that I'm feeling. I better call her up. She could be it. She might be the one. Hilarious, right? But this tells us why we are better knowing what we're doing. The people in this survey clearly did not understand their own physical emotional response. The physical creation of emotions from a chemical alteration due to the environment. Right, so we have two things. First of all, when the emotion comes in the mind, the body feels it. We become aware of this. Secondly, when the body has some physiological change, it creates an emotion in the mind. We become more sensitive to these things. So that's number two, filtering out negative emotions, helping us understand the physiological response and the physiological origin of some of our negative emotions, or any of our emotions. We are helped through this practice of meditation. The third one that I'm going to talk about is probably the most obvious and the most practical, maybe, and that is filtering out distractions, which is what we do during meditation, right? Why does that help us know what we're doing? Maybe it's too obvious to even talk about, but generally speaking, when we're doing something, we're at work, school, whatever, and we have to study something, I don't know, biology, and if we love biology, that's great. You open the textbook and you just can't wait to read it, and everything's wonderful. You lose consciousness of the external world because it's so fascinating. What if we hate biology? Right? If we hate biology, then what happens is we open the textbook and the mind goes off to the next European vacation, or it goes, to what am I doing with my friends this evening, or whatever that is, right? And we have to bring it back to the subject at hand. We have to do this repeatedly. It goes here and it goes there because it hates biology. And so we have to keep dragging it back and dragging it back and dragging it. Well, this is exactly what we do in the shrine. We try and do something, and we find ourselves wandering off here and there and the other place, and we pull back. We gather the mind again and again and again. What does this do for us? It makes us better at gathering the mind. We get stronger. It's like a muscle. We go to the gym and we build a muscle. We develop a talent by this practice of meditation of regathering the dispersed mind. This is just crucial for any kind of pointed attention that we need to give to anything that isn't utterly thrilling on its own. It helps us directly to know what we're doing. So that's three. First, a shift in perspective. Second, filtering out negative emotions. Third, filtering out distractions. Gathering in the dispersed mind repeatedly. See, the problem is we think that we're failing when we're doing this. Oh, I'm distracted, I can't meditate, blah, blah. There's value in these things. That's what I'm trying to point out. It helps us know what we're doing, as Mother says. Morning and evening. That's the conscious mind. Now I'm going to talk about two ways that this helps us with the unconscious mind. The first is that after we have been meditating for a while, we learn certain repeated patterns coming up in our meditations. We see a kind of theme to our distractions. We think if we've done it for a while, we have a problem with this person or that person. And then we've done it for a few decades and we realize it wasn't that person. It was the kind of person that was. Was he an authority figure? Or she? Was she an authority figure? Was this someone I was jealous of? Was this someone in some other category? Whatever it is our particular problem is, we notice that it's not the person. It's that I have a problem with jealousy. I have a problem with authority. I have a problem with anger. Whatever it is, we have some problem. We begin to realize these themes that come up repeatedly in our meditation. We get to know ourselves better. We get to understand our spiritual needs better. We get a view into the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind has its own agenda. And we begin to learn what that agenda is. And you think, okay, well, that's nice, but okay, now I know that I have a problem, let's say, with anger. What do I do? Yeah, I mean, now I'm clearer on this, and we do become clearer on these things. Oh boy, I found a new character defect. How exciting, right? So that doesn't sound really that wonderful. What do I do about this? Of course, there are different responses to that. My feeling is, for me personally, again, this is about the things that I've practiced and found that work. And that is, this is a time for prayer. When you have these strong subconscious tendencies that you become aware of, they are powerful. According to Vedanta, these are samskaras, impressions in the subconscious mind that, according to Vedanta, can go back thousands of lifetimes. Some of these tendencies we have are pretty carved in stone, it seems. And so, okay, now after all these decades of meditation, I'm still having a problem with fill in the blank, whatever that is. What do we do? Well, what I do at these times is I pray. I really don't know, other people do other things. This to me is the time for prayer. Ask for help. And as a kind of an aside here, I would also say that in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, we read again and again that the Master says you have to pray to God with tears in your eyes. He says this, you have to pray to God with tears in your eyes. This is one of his big teachings. If you can do this, it purifies your heart, and God listens to that prayer. And we think, at least I have thought over the years, okay, that's nice. I don't have any tears. So what am I going to do there? Where do I get these things? I go to the tear store. Sometimes they're there, and then sometimes they're not. But then, if we make a sincere effort, if we really try and concentrate the mind, and we are really being pulled by whatever it is, jealousy, anger, pride, lust, envy, greed, whatever it is that is bothering us, and we're fighting it, and we're trying so hard to concentrate, and we're so frustrated by this repeated failure mode, then naturally we are driven to tears. This is one way, of course. There are other ways, but we're not forcing anything. All we're doing is struggling hard in our meditation. Struggle hard in the meditation. Hit the wall. Realize that you can't get past this wall. Try super hard, and you will find yourself in tears. And you will find yourself praying with tears in your eyes. And now you think, okay, well, going home after work and sitting down and getting frustrated to the point of tears doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I would rather play video games. Well, okay, I mean, that's a choice that we all have to make. And of course, in spiritual life, there are going to be times for entertainment. I mean, we can't just flip a switch and suddenly change directions. We have to balance these things to keep our sanity. Nevertheless, I think we all know that we need to work on ourselves a lot more than we need to be entertained. So we have to figure that out for ourselves. How much of this I'm going to be able to put up with? How many nights of praying until I'm frustrated with tears in my eyes can I really stomach? It does, it's a shift in direction for the mind, and that's difficult. So it has to be done gradually, in a gentle way, so that we don't get overheated. Anyway, that is understanding our own unconscious agenda. And I'm going to go into, that's part one. Part two is something, a sort of not a corollary, but related subject is unconscious bias and motivated reasoning. Unconscious bias is fairly obvious. I mean, it's something that you want or don't want, something you like or hate or want to protect that you don't really have up to consciousness, that you're doing unconsciously. It's a prejudice, an unconscious prejudice. And motivated reasoning, what is that? That is what the psychologists refer to when we are reasoning with an agenda that we don't know about. In other words, there's a psychologist named Jonathan Haidt. Does anybody know that? He's actually a pretty well-known guy. He's written a bunch of books, smart guy. Anyway, he says there's two ways to arrive at the truth, a conclusion. There's two ways to arrive at a conclusion. The first way is the way of the scientist. The second way is the way of the lawyer. What does the scientist do, ideally? What the scientist does is he looks around for evidence and data, develops a theory and tests it, and then comes to a conclusion. Okay, this is the truth, assuming he got it right. What does the lawyer do? Starts with the conclusion. This is the position I'm going to defend, and then goes and looks for evidence to support and theories that will prove that particular conclusion. He has the truth already, or he's picked it, and then he's going to support it. Whereas the scientist comes out and says, I don't know the truth, I'm going to find it. And so the problem with motivated reasoning is that we think that we're the scientist when in fact we're being the lawyer. That's what motivated reasoning is. And so I think probably the most salient example, which is also kind of funny, of motivated reasoning, it's actually not that funny, it's more tragic, but is climate change, global warming. According to the American Institute of Physics, more than 99% of climate scientists today agree that climate change and global warming are due to human activity. It's actually very simple. Carbon dioxide and methane heat up the atmosphere. You can do this in a box and see for yourself. It's kind of a no-brainer. But it's not exactly 100%. It's well over 99%. And yet, according to the Ipsos poll that was taken this year, only 49% of the people in this country believe that climate change is caused by human activity. And the reason that they give is, well, we don't have a scientific consensus. There's still that 1% out there that maybe there's some other thing going on. So in the name of open-mindedness, we're going to deny this human role in climate change. And now think about just how silly that is. If we were going to buy a used car, and we took that used car to 100 mechanics, and 99 of them said it's a lemon, don't buy it, we would not buy that car. No one would buy that car. If we went to 100 dentists and 99 of them said, pull that tooth, we would pull the tooth. There is no one who would ignore 99 dentists for the one who says, don't pull the tooth. You go to the lawyer and say, I want to sue this person, and 99 of them say, you got no case, you're throwing your money out the window. One guy says, here, sign this retainer. We would run from him, right? Obviously. And so, of course, it isn't just climate science. We have this kind of unconscious bias that fuels this motivated reasoning in all kinds of things that we do, the people we meet, the political opinions that we have. We are not aware of our own reasoning process. And it turns out that these reasoning processes actually occur in different parts of the brain. The neuroscientists have learned that when we reason objectively, like the scientist, nominally. I've known scientists that are more like lawyers, but just for the sake of argument, let's just assume that they are actually being open-minded and honest about their conclusions. Then that reasoning process goes through one part of the brain. The lawyer's reasoning process goes through a completely different part of the brain. We actually use different parts of our brains for this. And why do we do this? The reason we do this is because we have some emotional attachment to the issue. We fear something, or we want to protect something, or we love something, we want to save it. And so we're going to reason our way to this thing. We have an emotional attachment, an emotional agenda that we are not aware of. That is what is causing our motivated reasoning. So what do we do about this? Yes, we know about this. Not only we know about this how. Remember Mother's teaching. You can't know, how can you actually know what you're doing unless you meditate twice a day? Well, we've got a better connection on our emotions. We detect them better. We're more aware of our emotions just because we're more aware of our mind and our body. So we're more aware of our emotions, which uncovers a lot of our motivated reasoning. And so these emotions we have understood to be complicit in our physiology. We understand that when the mind thinks of the emotion, the body responds. And the body can create emotions that are reflected in the mind. We have this idea. We've got this figured out because we have followed Mother's advice. That's nice. Now what do we do? What do we do about it? Knowing it is good. At least if you don't know that you have the problem, you can't solve it. But still, you've got to solve it once you know you have the problem. This is Words to Live By number 4. Words to Live By number 4 also comes from Holy Mother. She says, do you know the significance of japa and other spiritual practices? By these, the dominance of the sense organs is subdued. So, what is the idea here? The idea is that we want to attenuate the body's ability to be complicit in these negative emotions. That's what we want to do, right? When the emotions come into the mind, we feel it, we're more sensitive to it, we say, hey, what do we do at that time? I mean, if it's a strong emotion, take some deep breaths, breathe slowly in and out through the nose, and get back to your practice. And this teaching, the significance of japa and other spiritual practices, by these the dominance of the sense organs is subdued. This works. I have seen again and again in my life and in the lives of others that if we do this, if we chant the name of the Lord and we practice yoga, then these negative emotions that are reflected in the body are attenuated. And if we stop doing this, if we stop practicing these things, then these negative emotions, their ability to manifest in our body and therefore in our minds, just grows. This process where we practice these disciplines and attenuate the body's ability to reflect these negative emotions is called purification of the body in Vedanta. That's what we call this. We are purifying our bodies. We are reducing their ability to manifest these negative emotions that basically turn us into people like Danny Masterson and George Santos and all the rest of the tabloid victims. And everybody else, so many of these people, I just named them, but I mean, it's one after another who goes back. You know, there's a continual parade of these people. And it's because if we don't practice these things, we think we could never do this, we can never be that person. We can. If we stop practicing things, they grow slowly, slowly, slowly. And just like the Bhagavad Gita says, in gory detail, the ball bounces down the staircase until eventually we have lost our mooring. We have lost our sense, we've lost our direction, we don't know what to do anymore, and we wind up as like one of these tragic figures that we see in the news. So, I'll repeat it. Mother, again, do you know the significance of japa and other spiritual practices? By these, the dominance of the sense organs, which is what causes this, what reflect these negative emotions, and also launch them, is subdued, right? This will help us to subdue our minds, to bring this back full circle to the first teaching, right? That reducing the volatility of the sense organs will help us to subdue the mind, as Yudhishthira said to the magical bird at the lake. So that's 4. Those are 4 words to live by. I got one more. 10 minutes left. I think I can do this. But before I do that, I'm going to read them all again, because it's good to hear these things. If you're going to try and live by them, you have to remember them. So, where do we start? By subduing what do men escape grief? By subduing their minds. That is what Yudhishthira's answer was. The mind has to be kept in check. So what does this mean? Sri Ramakrishna comes in for words to live by number 2. The more you think of worldly things, the more you will be attached to them. And so how do we do that? How do we put that teaching into practice? Holy Mother has words to live by, number 3. If you don't meditate morning and evening, how can you know what you're doing? So meditating morning and evening helps us to understand ourselves, understand our lives, understand our thoughts and actions, our physiology. All these things, we know what we're doing, in Mother's pithy phrase. And then how do we keep these things from ruining us? These negative emotions that we have now detected in our bodies and in our minds. Mother, again, do you know the significance of japa and other spiritual practices? By these, the dominance of the sense organs is subdued. This biological drive to taste, touch, smell, swallow, eat, grab, all these things. That biological drive is subdued. Prevents us from ruin. So there they are, all 4, and now I'm going to do one more, and this is slightly different. It's longer, more difficult to remember, maybe, although I have had it committed to memory at times over the years because I've said it to myself so many times. This assumes that we have been living by the first 4 for a while. This last one that I'm going to talk about. So we've been doing this for a while. And what do we think? Like I said, our lives are going to get better. What we think of as our lives, the situation we find ourselves in, our mood, all these things, all these parameters that we use to measure the quality of our lives, they all go up with these practices. I promise. They do. What does that mean? Does that mean that we don't have any more problems? No. Does it mean that we don't face dangers and difficulties? No, it doesn't mean that. Does it mean that we always understand why we're facing a particular danger or difficulty or problem? No. None of those things it means, at least in my experience. I have not seen that. There are these great super souls that actually do seem to know these things. They are few and far between. Hopefully we'll all get there. In the meantime, there is a long period of following these teachings where you don't know why whatever it is that just happened to you, and you're still resentful about it, and by golly, I've been meditating morning and evening and doing all these things, and still blah, blah, blah is happening, or I'm still dealing with this, or this person said this, or whatever it is. We're suffering. Okay, life's better. I'm more aware of myself. I'm more aware of my situation. I'm more aware of what I'm doing. I'm happier. And yet, I'm grumpy because I'm suffering right now for something that I don't understand and doesn't seem fair. I don't know if anybody ever really escapes that problem here. Even Sri Ramakrishna was driven, he said himself. He stood on the embankment of the Ganges ready to kill himself because Hridoy tormented him so badly. And so to aspire to a life without suffering seems unrealistic to me. We are going to have suffering here. As Buddha's, this is noble truth number 1, according to Buddha. Life is pain. And so this last teaching that I'm going to talk about is a beautiful letter that a suffering devotee wrote to Swami Saradananda, and this is Swami Saradananda's response. Probably most of you know Swami Saradananda was one of Sri Ramakrishna's monastic disciples, and he came with this wonderful response to this suffering devotee. This is one of you guys, one of us, one of me, who has been doing this for a while and still finds himself in a situation that just is driving him bats. So what does Swami Saradananda say to him? He says, the Lord is making you his own. This is his answer. The Lord is, why, O Lord? That's what we say when this happens. Why me? Why this? Why now? The answer is that the Lord is making you his own. See, that's not what we do. We think if I hadn't made a left turn over here, if I just hadn't said this to this person or this or that other thing, we try and connect the dots. Why, I'm miserable. How did I get to this state of misery? And we try and figure out all this map, cause and effect map. There is no peace in that endeavor. We'll always be second-guessing ourselves. Oh, if I hadn't listened to that doctor, I would have gotten diagnosed earlier and then something better would have happened. We can always go back and torment ourselves with things that we should have done to avoid the situation we find ourselves in. And yet the mind wants to do this. We can know that, and the mind keeps going back and forth. Every time the answer to this question, why am I in this situation? The Lord is making me his own. That is an answer applicable to all of us that actually offers peace of mind. All these little particulars that we entertain to try and explain how we got to where we are, they don't give that. And we'll just, after we come up with one, we'll just go back and find another one, again and again and again. That's what we do. That's what the mind does. The Lord is making you his own. That is the answer. He will not allow even the slightest trace of ego to remain within you. Part of being made the Lord's own is having your ego crushed. Sorry, that seems to be how it works. The Lord is making you his own. He will not allow even the slightest ego to remain within you. The sufferings and difficulties that you are going through are intended to make you realize that you have no independent will of your own. It is all given over to the Lord. Right there. So, whatever problem we're going through, we can apply this answer to why is this happening to me? This is a constructive answer to why is this happening to me, as opposed to all the destructive answers that the mind offers, like you're a terrible person, you have bad karma, God has abandoned you. All the darkness that's in our minds that the mind is so eager to offer us for consideration. We can just banish all those and instead listen to this teaching. So much better, so much more constructive. He goes on and says, therefore, be contented with what he does and wherever he keeps you. Never allow any doubts to cross your mind. The moment doubt comes, immediately think of the Lord and be convinced that whatever takes place by his will is always for your good. Now listen to what he says here. It's amazing. He says, never allow any doubts to cross your mind. And the very next sentence after that, what does he say? He doesn't say if doubt comes. He says the moment doubt comes, because it's going to come. We are going to doubt this. That's a fact. He doesn't say if you doubt. Even Vivekananda doubted. His whole life fell apart, right? His father died, his family was starving, his friends betrayed him, all these terrible things happened. He doubted. He lived next to Sri Ramakrishna, had all these amazing spiritual experiences, and after all these things went south, he doubted. If he can doubt, we're going to doubt. Doubt is going to happen. So he doesn't say if you doubt. He says when doubt happens. Never do it. Here's what you do when it happens. And what is that? Immediately think of the Lord, however we do that. Breathe, visualize, whatever we do. And be convinced, tell your mind, whatever is happening by his will is always for your good. And then he goes and he drives this point home a little further. He says, whatever is happening at his command. Yes, this is all God's fault. Whatever is happening at his command. And if he wills, the situation will change. Yes, he has put you here, and yes, he can change it if he wants to, and so far he doesn't want to. Putting the blame squarely on God here. With this attitude, resign yourself completely to the Lord and be happy and free from care. With this attitude, resign yourself completely to the Lord and be happy and free from care. Drive the worries out. Remember the Lord. Drive the worries out of your mind. And try with all you've got to be happy and free from care. This is an exercise just like doing push-ups, because your mind is going to fight this. And you have to try it again and again and again. I'm going to read the whole thing from start to finish without the commentary so you hear it continually. The Lord is making you his own. He will not allow even the slightest ego to remain within you. The sufferings and difficulties that you are going through are intended to make you realize that you have no independent will of your own. It is all given over to the Lord. Therefore, be contented with what he does and wherever he keeps you. Never allow any doubts to cross your mind. The moment doubt comes, immediately think of the Lord and be convinced that whatever he does is always for your good. Whatever is happening at his command. And if he wills, the situation will change. With this attitude, resign yourself completely to the Lord and be happy and free from care. If you want, I'll be happy to cut and paste and email this to you if you let me know your address. Thank you all for coming. May the good Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. May good betide all. May happiness come to all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified with the armor of love, goodwill, joy, and understanding. Om. Peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us. Peace be unto all. Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om, Tat Sat. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. So let's see what's happening here. Well, I know next week I'm speaking in Santa Barbara. I don't have to look at the schedule for that. So that's the 1st of October. And next week is October. Here's October. Okay. So next week here, we're going to have speech karma. Swami Arupeshananda. That sounds like fun. And the big news item is that Durga Puja is coming up in Santa Barbara next month. That's on the 22nd, I think, or is it 21st? Let's see, it should say here. Saturday, the 21st, there is Durga Puja in Santa Barbara. And I recommend highly going to Durga Puja in Santa Barbara. If you've never been to the Santa Barbara convent, it is one of the most stunningly beautiful places in the world. So if you can make it up to Santa Barbara for Durga Puja, I strongly encourage you. And I think Swami Sarvadevananda, our leader, is out of town for a few weeks, but he'll be back, of course, for Durga Puja in Santa Barbara. And let's see, next Sunday in Trabuco, Swami Dhyana Yogananda, the abbot of Trabuco, will be speaking. And what else? Here in Hollywood, I already said, so that's just about everything. Did I miss anything? Do you want to say something?
First of all, thank you for a fascinating talk. Swami Arupeshananda stays at our retreat center in Pinion Hills. Our library now is being kept open after the talk, so feel free to visit the library. A volunteer is keeping it open. And there's refreshments available. If this is your first time, welcome. We have a bookshop, and we do this every week. So, thank you. Oh, there's also
Q&A in the library, right?
Next Saturday. Oh,
okay.
Right. Swami will go to the living room
Not
next to
library,
the
yeah, living
bookshop.
room, sorry.
And we'll have some discussion. If you have some questions or objections, he will be ready to address those.
This is your chance. Yeah.
And there's also an interesting program happening next Saturday, September 30th, in San Diego. It's a self-care and seva mini retreat. Starts at 9:15 in the morning with yoga therapy, and then there's talks, exercises, and meditations with Swami Harinamananda and Dr. Sheila Patel, and then Swami Atmavidyananda is going to be offering a guided Reiki, and at 1 p.m. there's lunch. So that's in San Diego. Just thought you might be interested to know about that.